Welcome to Engaging Culture, a podcast presented by Bridgeway Christian Church. I'm Brian Kiley. Today, my co-host, Pastor Lance Hahn, and I will be breaking down the Super Bowl. But we're not going to talk about the game itself. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl as a cultural event. We'll talk about why this game is such a big deal in our society, even for non-sports fans. And of course, we'll talk about what stuck out to us from the commercials and the halftime show. All of that and more on this episode of Engaging Culture. Well, hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 19 of the Engaging Culture Podcast. I am Brian Kiley with Pastor Lance Hahn. Lance, how are you?
Good. You know what? Here's the thing. This is a big deal. The Super Bowl is a big deal, and we got to talk about it because it just went down and everybody was involved.
Everybody's involved. It is, well, and this is part of why we're doing an episode on the Super Bowl. It is such a almost unprecedented cultural event in the United States of America. And I think even it wasn't until I did some research on the actual numbers in preparation for today, like that it took me doing that to realize exactly how big of a deal it is compared to other things that are on television.
Right.
I mean, there's absolutely nothing like it in American, not just sports, but American television. Nothing like the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it is a little bit bizarre because I think the most unusual thing about it is there are not as many sports fans as you think there are. And yet a sports element is the most dominant.
Right.
Weird.
People
meaning
who...
for television ratings.
Well, and people that they will not watch a single football game the entire year. They're still there. They're watching the Super Bowl.
That's right.
They're eating their nachos. They're doing their thing.
Yes.
So we're not going to talk about the game much, but...
we have to talk about it a little bit.
Oh my gosh. I wanted to renounce my sports fandom by the end of that game. It was so brutally boring. Did you survive the whole thing?
Okay, I survived the whole thing. My wife, it was so funny because she said, I'm trying to be a trooper. That's what she said. So this
is something to be endured.
Yeah, so she was watching and she looks over at me and she goes, it's not just me. This is really boring, right? Because as a non-sports fan, she was like, I think this is horrible, but I think it's just me.
It's like, I think I'd be bored anyways, but
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was so bad that at one point in the second half, we were like excited about a great punt. Like, nobody gets excited about punting in football. And we're like, wow, that was a great... I mean, it turned out to be a
great
Super Bowl record, but it was almost like we're all mocking it, and then the announcers are even mocking. Like, wow, this is some big excitement right here relative to how this game is going.
Here's the thing, is that one of my things I least like about football at all is when they fail and they have to punt. All of a sudden, it was like they were circling how many punts there were, and he's like, we have had 8 straight punts. And it was like, that is the one thing I hate about football, and all we did was do that the entire time.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, who is the young quarterback? I believe he's from the Kansas City Chiefs.
Patrick Mahomes.
When they played in the playoffs, it looked exactly like Jared Goff, where it was these young guys, they would get the ball and they would throw it and it would fail. And then they'd throw it and it'd fail and then they punt. And it was like they were doing everything so quickly, like they were used to having like cool, big, dramatic plays. And they went up against a buzzsaw with Tom Brady and the Patriots. And what I told my wife is I said, this almost seems like it's professionalism against raw talent. Mm-hmm. And professionalism just destroyed them.
Yes, the old guard, as it were, kind of took care of business. It was, did you know, lowest scoring Super Bowl in NFL history.
I wondered about that because the first half, the lowest scoring first half in a Super Bowl is 2 points. They scored 3. So they were the second lowest first half. And you can imagine that Super Bowl was awesome. With 2 points.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, I said to another one of our people on our team this morning as he walked in and made a joke about how he's still recovering from how awful the game was.
Yes.
I said that was the Super Bowl that the NFL deserved. I am a sports fan.
What do you mean?
I like football. It is not my favorite sport, but I am definitely a fan of the game. But man, I have a hard time with the NFL. Everything from, I mean, first of all, personally, just the ethics of football, I'm having a hard time with. As we know, people are just destroying themselves.
Right.
I feel that the most, I'll go to like between maybe 1 and 3 high school football games a year.
Yes.
And I'm like, there is no way in heck I would ever let my kids play football. But I will pay money
fine with that.
to watch someone else's kids destroy their brains. There's some.
I am completely fine with the violence of football. That is the difference between you and me.
Yeah. So there's that. There is. I'm not a guy who's going to get all hung up on officiating and all that, but just there was such a blatant error that just cannot happen. That was the reason the Rams made it.
Yeah.
That to me, just the integrity of the game is damaged. And just, I don't know, there's just not a lot about the NFL that's likable. I mean, the way they just botched the whole Kaepernick thing is a challenge for me. And it's just, I don't know. The NFL is not, I don't know. I am a huge basketball fan, as you know. And I feel like the NBA just sort of gets it in terms of how do you manage challenging cultural issues. The NFL is just totally...
They seem very old school.
Yeah, and just kind of tone deaf. So
yeah,
anyway.
I would say that I absolutely love the NFL, just the sport, and I feel like they're in a low in the season of my enjoyment of how they do stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's just like the bottom of the barrel for me lately.
Yeah.
But I really love football. I think that is a blast. That was something that I had in common with my dad. We enjoyed that a lot. As a matter of fact, the day that he died, I read to him because he could only listen. He couldn't speak, and I read to him Sports Illustrated talking about all the new quarterbacks and everything. Yeah, so I was reading football to him the day that he died.
Well, and that's, I mean, what a beautiful picture of, you and I've talked about this before, just how sports is a bonding agent. I mean, for women as well as men. I don't mean to make it a solely single gender thing, but you know, it's a bond, it's a way to bond and connect over these things, and it goes beyond sports, which is fun. And I think football, that happens more with football in the United States than probably in any other sport. Which is cool.
I also think that one of the reasons is there's so few games in comparison. So the average NBA season is how long? You know this.
82 games.
82 games. How about baseball?
162.
162. How many football?
16.
16. There you go. So what happens is, hockey. That's a good call.
How many? 82? All right. Same as the NBA. I should be able to remember that.
I did not know that.
All right.
When you have that many games, what happens is there's quick turnover, and so the storylines tend to get disjointed. When you have a long week where you're talking about what's going to be happening, there's a lot of buildup.
Yep.
So like, is Patrick Mahomes going to be able to keep doing what he's doing? What's going to happen when Carson Wentz is out and Nick Foles steps in? Right. And then they start thinking back, well, you remember last time that happened, and they actually went to the Super Bowl and they were Super Bowl winners. Yeah. And it allows the story to build.
Yeah.
Because to me, anything that is popular in the world surrounds story. So whether it's celebrities or whatever it is, you want the stories.
Yeah.
And I think that football lets a story build longer than the other ones.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think you're right, because there is, like you said, there's that time between
to
games.
reflect and it builds. Yeah.
Or you even look at, as much as I love sports, I don't consume a ton of sports media that's not related to the actual games themselves. Like, I don't read tons of analysis. I'll read some, but not a whole lot. But you think about, and I pretty much never watch sports analysis on TV. Even as a sports fan, I don't really get the appeal of some of that. But
that's frustrating to me.
But you have 2 weeks before the Super Bowl to build it, and it's so much more than just the game. It's the personalities and the backstory stories, and the young coach and the old coach and all this stuff. But so here's what's really crazy to me is that we talked a minute ago about television. The Super Bowl, you look back on 2018, Super Bowl was the most watched primetime telecast across all genres in 2018, 43 million viewers. The next watched, so second place, also a football game, less than half, 17.3 million viewers. This Is Us was third at 11.9. My wife was one of those. And the remainder of the top 10 telecasts in 2018, all football games. All of those games beat out the Olympics. They beat out the Grammys. They beat out the Oscars, the World Series, the NBA Finals, everything.
Wow.
And during the fall, during the football season, 46 of the top 50 most watched telecasts in the United States during the NFL season were football games. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, there's a lot of TV, Lance.
That's insane.
And football beats all of them. So you've talked about the storyline element of it.
Yes.
Why else do you think? I mean, football is so massively popular, and I guess I'm a super nerd NBA fan. I'm a more casual NFL fan. I just did not get the magnitude of this. Why else do you think it's such a big...
Okay, so I'm going to be thinking healthy things, right? So I'll let you focus on the negative. No, I don't think you have negative. I'm just kidding. I would just say that Think about tailgating, right? So there are not tailgating soccer games. There are not tailgating NBA games. You don't tailgate at an NBA game. You can, but it's not really tailgating. It's not the same thing. Right. You don't tailgate at any of the other. It's usually a football game is the idea that everybody gets together and they have food with it.
Yep.
Right? So there's this whole, we're all eating together so to me, it is one of the few big community events that America has. I don't think we have a lot of community.
Can I say something about that real quick? So back in college, when I was at UCLA, I would go to pretty much all the football games.
Yes.
And it was always amazing to me to show up for a game and walk through the parking lot.
Yeah.
And see the setup that people had for their tailgating.
Huge.
It is. I mean, I've just never really been a part of that culture. I've tailgated maybe once or twice in my life for all the hundreds of events I've been to. I haven't really been a tailgater. You got TVs, you got these grills that are like better than most people have in their homes. And I actually think it's really cool the way, like you said, the community element of it, that this is, hey, on Saturdays when our team is in town, we show up at 9, we tailgate till 3, and then we go to the game together. It's like, what all a fun event. Community. I think it's awesome.
Well, it's huge. And so, my kids go to Folsom High, right, which has a tremendous, they won state, right? And so as long as they've been there, they've been in this crazy winning team. There's tailgating there, literally at a high school game.
Wow.
So it's the whole parking lot. There's people that are all set up and doing and grilling and all that for a high school football game. Now, if you're in the South, that's normal to you because those are football communities. Yep. That's not the case necessarily always in the North or especially on the coast, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that you would have a football community up in Northern California is a little weird. So I've watched that develop. So to me, because you look at it, everybody has a part to play. It's basically like a barbecue, right? So in a barbecue, the kids get to play together, the wives get to talk together, the guys get to eat together, right? And then everybody has this event that's community driven. That's why I think that football keeps carrying on, because when you look at, if you go to a Super Bowl party, a lot of people aren't even watching the game.
Right.
They're still hanging with each other.
Yeah. Except to quiet down during the commercials.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think that the community element, and to your point earlier about how the games are spaced out.
Yes.
And then also the fact that this isn't necessarily true for high school, but I think the fact that for most college games, they or NFL games, they happen during the day.
Yes.
Which creates sort of a different dynamic in terms of the tailgating and everything else. So one of my kind of weird theories as to the popularity of football. Here's one that's not weird, and then I'll give you one that's weird. I think people gravitate to football because the basics are extremely simple. You got to move the ball, get it in the end zone. You either run it or you throw it. Okay. So that's enough that you can sort of scoop up your person who doesn't know anything, doesn't care, isn't interested in strategy. They can get it. There are certain like I watch cricket and I'm confused. I don't understand what's going on out
They
here,
don't understand either.
I don't think they do either. They're just making it up as they go. But football is very simple. But on the whole other end of the spectrum, football is an unbelievably complex game when you get into the ins and outs. I made a comment while watching the Super Bowl to my aunt that I said, I don't really understand football. And she's like, "What? What are you talking about? You're totally into this stuff." And that's true. I am totally into this stuff. But there is a level of sophistication that is so far beyond my understanding. So I think it's kind of interesting that you can have a broad range of fans who can all sort of engage with the same thing.
Well, okay, so it's funny that you say that because now you have to remember, I've been surrounded by women my whole life, right? So I'm only around, my wife, my daughters, my mom, my sister. I've always been around women my whole life. And I have heard my whole life that it's a complicated sport and they don't get it. So none of them understood it. Now, I think like basketball, your whole goal is to put it in that little hoop. That to me is easy. I think hockey's complicated because you're supposed to just get it in that little goal. The problem is everything goes weird.
Seems hard to do.
It seems really hard to do, and it seems like I can't follow the puck and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, so like soccer, you have to kick it in that goal. But football has so many moving parts. I feel like it's more complicated because it has more people on the field at the same time.
Yep.
And then they go, wait, why does that guy get to throw it and the other guys don't get to? Well, why is that guy running behind him? So can you run it or do you have to throw it? Well, you can do both. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
yeah. There's a
there's
lot.
so much going on. It's funny that you think of it as simplistic when in fact I've only heard it's complicated. But I think you're right.
Well, from a strategic standpoint,
yeah.
I do think it's incredibly complicated, far more so than most other sports.
Right.
So anyway, now here, my other weird theory.
Yes, I'm ready for this one.
I think part of the reason we love football is the anonymity of it. We can't see it's violent and visceral, and that's part of why we like it. And the same reason why NASCAR is popular, because people like the crashes. I'm not saying every NASCAR fan is in it for the crashes, but that's part of what draws people to it. I think the violence of and the physicality of the game is appealing to people, but I think the fact that we can't see their faces and it almost is like they're interchangeable parts on a field. I think on some level that allows us to connect in with it more than we'd be able to if we could see their faces, see the pain, see the emotion, and all of that. And it's funny to me because I'm a fan of the San Francisco 49ers and the UCLA Bruins. How many of the 49ers football players would I be able to, like, if they were walking down the street, other than realizing, like, hey, that's a big buff dude that could probably break things.
Right.
Like, would I be able to recognize their faces?
Right.
Maybe a half dozen. Whereas I could probably recognize half of the players in the entire NBA. You know, like it's a totally different thing. And I think we're able to have some distance from it. And somehow that draws us in a little bit more. Now, it's a weird theory.
It is a weird theory. Okay, so let me play with that one for a moment because I think in one sense you're absolutely right. So I will tell you that the violence is acceptable because of the anonymity. Meaning it looks like robots out there. So if one guy gets hit, you can go, "Oh, what a good hit! Dang!" Well, they're all covered up, so you can't see that was so-and-so's son that just got destroyed and then his spine is broken. You know what I mean? So that does help.
Yeah.
But I would actually argue that the storylines would be better if you could see their face and the emotion of it. I do think the anonymity kind of ruins it. So we're still drawn in despite that. In my opinion, I'm like, man, you can't even see these guys. And so I don't know if that draws in or it's a hard thing. I'm not sure.
I can see how, you can sort of play that both ways.
Yeah.
I think on some level, it allows us to accept the violence of it, but it does inhibit the sense of personal connection, which you feel when you can see more of a person.
Now, I will say this. I know that you you struggle a lot more with the violence, right, of that thing. Now, to a traditional football fan, so I grew up around my dad liking football.
Yep.
I was a fan of the Dallas Cowboys under Tom Landry and the Pittsburgh Steelers when they had Franco Harris, right? So we're going way back.
Oh, yeah. Terry Bradshaw.
Yes, Terry Bradshaw. So as a old school football fan, the sport today is not violent at all. like literally, you can't touch the quarterback. The minute he gets it out of his hand, you're not allowed to get near him. The punter or you're not allowed to touch the guy. There's so many rules. You can't push off. You can't hit helmet to helmet. You can't do this. You can't do that.
Receiver stuff.
Everything is protected. And so for an old school fan to hear that it's violent today doesn't even make sense. You're going, there's no violence. Everybody's protecting everybody. They have the best pads, the best helmets, the best everything. And the reality is that most of the injuries are non-visible injuries. And that's a very different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, like the movie Concussion and all that stuff, when you start realizing that there is damage to the body, but it's not like it used to be. Yeah. It used to be they were smashing into each other and there was no rules like that.
Yeah. And guys are suffering now in ways that are out of the limelight.
Yes.
Whether it's the CTE and the brain stuff, or even guys that are limping for the rest of their lives. That it's like nobody knows that so and so superstar quarterback can hardly get out of the bed in the morning in his 50s because
yes,
over and done with. We're watching the guy who's going to be that in 20 years.
Absolutely, so. and because our medicine is so good, it can mask anything in the moment.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So we're talking about football, but the Super Bowl itself. Why do you think it is so popular? Because it really does seem like the world stops for this game. It's almost, and it's a notable thing to not watch it. Whereas
Yes.
it's not a notable thing to not watch pretty much anything else. I think it's interesting, just as a social dynamic, forgetting the fact that it happens to be a football game. Why do you think it is so popular for those who are fans and non-fans alike?
Yeah, I think it is. It's one of those building on the mass amount of people. It's that you want to be able to say a little something about it because it's going to come up in conversation. So a lot of people make a lot more want to watch it, make a lot more want to watch it. It builds, right? That's really what happened. It became a cultural phenomenon because now someone's going to go, oh, dude, did you see the game? You don't want to be the left out one.
No,
I didn't. Now, I do think there's other things that are like that. So in certain groups, people are going to go, oh, have you been watching the Olympics?
Mm-hmm.
But it's more okay to say, nah, I stepped out of it. I'm not watching this year.
Yeah.
That's not as big of a deal
Yeah.
as opposed to there's so much money and 43 million people just watch the Super Bowl and you're going to turn around and go, did you watch it? And they go, no. It makes you an outsider.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. I think that's very true. I think two other elements of it is that even in our isolated society, cultural gatherings are popular. And they're important.
Yeah.
So the Super Bowl, again, forgetting that it happens to be a sporting event, as a cultural gathering point.
That's it.
I think there is still something in us that we are looking for a reason to get together. And then also, and we're gonna get into more of this kind of for the remainder of the episode now, there's a lot going on in the Super Bowl for non-fans, right?
Absolutely.
In most sporting events, there is not a big draw except for the game, with the possible exception if it's a huge event, they'll have somebody famous sing the national anthem.
Right.
But you're there for the game. Whereas you could be just bored to tears by football and still have kind of a fun time watching the Super Bowl because of the halftime show, commercials, all of that. So it is interesting, its ability to bring together people of diverse interests in a way that, like, I don't care about movies, so I'm not watching the Academy Awards.
Right.
I don't care. I'll maybe look at an awards list afterwards, but I'm not going to watch. No interest whatsoever. But like, there aren't interesting commercials in the Oscars to draw me in.
No.
Right.
So here's the thing. I feel like the NFL did the best job capturing what a live sporting event is like. Okay, so for example, I do not need to follow the River Cats to know their record, right?
Right.
I mean, I every once in a while I'll listen to a game, but I love going live. Why do you love going live? Because during a live sporting event, there's stuff in all the commercial breaks. There's stuff happening, and it's supposed to entertain your kids. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to entertain non-sports fans. Sometimes it's wives or husbands. You know what I'm saying? Where they're like, I'm not going to ever watch this on TV.
Yep.
But there's so much going on. That's talking, there's the races on the big screen and the Jumbotron and the dance off and the kiss cam and there's so much. I think that NFL has done such a good job making it feel like that. Saying, listen, even if you're not even into the game, the sheer atmosphere that you got fun commercials and you got crazy stuff going on, you got a whole concert in the middle of it, you got crazy commercial, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
They've done a great job to say, we are going to bombard you with a variety of multi-sensory for a bunch of different groups.
Yeah, and that brings a lot of people in. Now, some might be asking, or some might wonder, okay, why? Okay, your pastors, your church is a podcast presented by a church. We're audience of Christ followers.
Right.
Why the heck are we talking about the Super Bowl? The reason we're talking about it is because part of our call as Christ followers is to understand our culture and to understand what is going on around us. And again, this is an unprecedented cultural event. And more than that, we can learn a lot from the culture by studying the mass media, by studying what is being shown to us and what is it that people are paying attention to. And I think that the Super Bowl gives us a unique window into kind of the general sort of, pardon the term, but the sort of the zeitgeist of the era. I mean that metaphorically, not literally, because we have things like the halftime show that are designed to appeal to a wide audience. We have all of these ads that are playing on different emotions that corporate executives and study groups and ad people think, oh, this is going to connect to sell our product, which tells you a lot about the culture, right?
Absolutely.
And as Christ followers, we need to, now, we can talk about positives and negatives to a lot of these cultural assumptions and a lot of these ideas that seem to generate buzz in our culture. But as Christ followers, we need to not be ignorant of them. We need to recognize that they're there. So that's what we're going to talk about for the remainder of the episode, is just sort of elements that stuck out to us from these non-football parts of the game. And then what we can learn from them. What do they tell us about our culture? So let's start with one where I know you're going to have a lot more thoughts than I will. Let's talk about the halftime show.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on Maroon 5, Travis Scott, Big Boy, all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So it was, I watch every Super Bowl and every halftime show for a long, long time. It was flat out lame. I am a Maroon 5 fan in the sense that they have an ability to write a catchy song that becomes a bestseller. Mm-hmm. Who they're working with, how they organize it out is stunning to me. Mm-hmm. They have usually a very captivating frontman named Adam Levine.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of him, Lance?
And I have a bit of a man crush on the dude personally. And yet he drives me nuts because I get the impression that his personality is horrible. But anyway, so sure enough, they go into this big halftime show, and Maroon 5 is one of the biggest bands on the planet right now, and it was just a yawner. It wasn't even a good concert. Like normally you got people coming in on, big old huge animatronics, and you got stuff flying all over the place. You also have them interacting with each other, like, oh, there's a cameo with this and that. It was a flat out boring, awkward dancing Adam Levine, which, by the way, how he lost his soul and suddenly started dancing like me. Dude, that was so embarrassing. He was moving along with some of the other guys, like with Travis Scott and stuff and I was like, please stop dancing. What is going on with you? You look like I just woke up and decided to do that.
Like, I'm going to dance now.
Oh, it was terrible. And
That's
like
funny.
He normally has some type of cool vibe. It was completely gone. And then the only thing they could do in order to keep people's interest is he just began to disrobe. That was it. So he would take off his jacket and had a new jacket. Then he'd take off his shirt, and then they finished the concert. That was it. You had Travis Scott doing his thing, and it was like, oh, that was somewhat interesting. Oh, you had Big Boy do his big fur coat thing. Oh, that was interesting. Really, it wasn't. All of it was lame. Yeah. So what they try to do, and I always find this fascinating because the halftime show is saying, what music does America want to hear? Mm-hmm. So they've had everything from Metallica on there. They've had Katy Perry. They've had, it was not supposed to be Maroon 5. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be other bands, and other more popular people. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is, how do you say what music America wants?
Yeah.
Because no matter what you're going to put up there, a huge portion of the nation's going to hate.
Yep.
And so one of the cool things that they can grab all these different groups and meaning of around the table, you can have people that love it because you got country people that love this stuff. You have city people that love Super Bowl. And now you have to pick a genre.
Yep.
And it's just going to bomb with somebody.
Yeah.
So the only way you can get away with it is do something either shocking that people will talk about. There's been a number of those.
Yep.
Or you do something that is overwhelming and amazing. So, like, I think live, one of the things that they did is they had these hanging lights that moved around, and then they ended up spelling out love when he was talking about love. If you saw the outside of the stadium, they were shooting off the huge amount of fireworks. Yeah. Everyone in Atlanta knew when it was halftime. Right. I mean, the amount of fire that was shooting out of that building was incredible.
Yeah.
So, but they did none of those things this time. Right. There was nothing interesting about it, and it was a lame concert with an awkward dancing dude.
How do you really feel?
There you go.
There you go. So I read a few different reviews of the performance,
yes.
And I'm going to read you the first paragraph of, this was a great one. So first of all, the headline, and I'm a little bit of a word nerd, and this is why I like the New Yorker, is because their writers are really, really gifted writers, is the headline was, "The Artless Spectacle of Maroon 5 at the Super Bowl."
Amen.
And here's the first paragraph, which this is actually, I learned some interesting things in this, but there may be no gig less desirable than the Super Bowl halftime show. It is unpaid and wildly laborious, and the acts booked to perform it are usually so deep into already prosperous careers that the lone carrot, a television audience of around 100 million, seems unnecessary if not unenticing. The NFL courts provocateurs but forbids any actual provocation, thus ensuring, with rare exceptions, an expertly but largely bloodless show. The whole debacle feels stressful, a psychotic melody performed without spontaneity. Why bother?
Dude, that's super good. It is.
Right?
I mean, it's brutal to do.
Yeah.
It's almost like hosting. You remember there was a recent thing about trying to host some of these Academy Awards and all these Grammys and stuff because everyone critiques you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're up there to be slammed.
Yeah, you're just going to get mocked.
You're going to get mocked no matter what happens.
Right.
So it does seem brutal, but it's an honor.
Yeah.
So you kind of go through the hoops to get the honor.
I guess. Well, and this year, yeah, they had a lot of people turn him down. So they had a hard time even getting Maroon 5, which there are a number of reasons for that. But all right, enough about all that. Let's get to the good stuff. We're talking some commercials here.
Amen.
So a lot of people who tune into the Super Bowl do it for the commercials, right?
Yes,
at my
absolutely.
house, there was, I referenced this a moment ago, there was, we didn't have a lot of people over, just a few family, but there was plenty of conversation during the game and almost none during the commercials. And we talked a minute ago about how the commercials are interesting because they're an attempt by brands to connect with people.
Yes.
I think there's also part that is interesting that the Super Bowl ads are just so expensive, $5.1 million for a 30-second spot.
Yes.
That there's something about that's like, okay, how are they going to spend their $5 million?
That is the number one
Yeah.
interesting thing to me is I'm saying you're going to blow a huge amount of money on a 30, 15, maybe 1 minute spot. That's
Yeah,
all you got.
no, that's
Those are your seconds. And in those seconds, how in the world are you going to justify what you just paid?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Okay, I need to pause us for a second. I'm going to reference the comments that we're getting live on Facebook for the first time, I think, in about 40
fantastic.
episodes
I love
here.
it.
Because lots of people are pointing out, and forgive us, listeners, we have not yet mentioned, Gladys Knight was fantastic. The national anthem, she was tremendous. So I don't know if you caught that part, Lance, but Gladys Knight sung the national anthem, and she was amazing.
Okay, well, honestly, I missed the national anthem. The kickoff was in the air when I finally got to the TV because I was doing something with helping my daughter out, and then I ran upstairs and I was like, okay, I gotta solve this, and I gotta run upstairs, and I was like, I'm in, and the ball was in the air.
In the air. Okay. Well,
I missed it.
She was great. It's worth watching.
Oh,
okay,
bummer.
so some interesting, first of all, and we're going to share some of our favorite and least favorite ads here in a second, but some interesting themes I found in some of these ads. So you had, first of all, some companies are trying to either repair their image or correct thinking. So Verizon, for example, which got in huge trouble because they were throttling the data for first responders during the Mendocino fires. And even when when the first responder said, hey, Verizon, we need your help. We rely on your data to coordinate our rescue efforts here. Verizon still wouldn't do it until they upgraded their plan.
I didn't even know that.
So Verizon was in real big trouble for that. So they did some actually really beautiful ads honoring first responders and saying how when that call was made, we're there to help you, except they weren't. That one time. So you got Verizon trying to, fix their
Save their
image.
bacon, yeah.
You've got the NFL, which not so much in the ads, but I noticed a ton of spots during the game where the NFL is trying to say, hey, look, we care about social justice, anyway, I don't want to get into the Kaepernick stuff,
Sure.
but like their reputation has taken a hit for their horrible handling of that situation.
Right.
And I would say just not being honest about the situation. So they've taken a big hit for that. So they're trying to do a lot of ads like, hey, the NFL cares about social justice. And then you've got things like the Washington Post, which had a tremendous ad with Tom Hanks, who was recently in that movie. It was just called The Post, wasn't it?
The Post.
Yeah, great movie. Talking about the importance of journalism. And we've talked ad nauseum on this podcast about the importance of media and all that stuff. So I thought that was an interesting theme. Want to talk about any of these other themes we saw in some ads that appeared again and again?
Well, the thing that was so odd to me is how many robotics were involved. I thought that was so bizarre. If we're just talking about just in general kind of a theme.
Yeah.
Because really you have all these ad agencies, and I think it's the case with movies where people start talking in the industry and they're like, hey, we're really going to start leaning into comic book movies. And then all of a sudden, all the studios start making comic book movies.
Yeah.
Or they're like, well, we're really going into the Nicholas Sparks vibe. And then everybody makes something that's weepy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Well, I think that ad agencies do the same thing where they're going to go, hey, we're really leaning in towards a future focus. How about you guys do? And they're not saying you guys do it too, but what's going to be popular?
Yep.
But still, these are ad agencies keeping a lockdown on what their real commercial is. And yet there's this consistent theme that went through it of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of commercials about robotics.
Yeah.
And it's like, why this year was it a big robotics theme? Very bizarre, which, by the way, speaking of a commercial, so I believe that, what's the name of James Corden's new show that happened right after the Super Bowl?
Oh, gosh.
It's like
I don't know.
World's Best or something like that?
Yeah, it's basically CBS's version of America's Got Talent.
Exactly. But they showed an ad for that. And did you see the one-armed violin player?
Yes.
Holy
That was unbelievable.
cow.
I mean, that got my attention big time.
It literally stunned me that you have this young Asian lady doing these incredible moves, and her one hand is playing the top of the violin, and an what was I?
Prosthetic
arm,
yeah.
but it wasn't even a prosthetic arm. It was like wires and cables coming, and it was this robotic arm that was doing the bow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was pretty stunning.
Okay, so that was flat out stunning. But was so interesting because everything kind of had this technology future robotic vibe, and I find it fascinating. How did that happen?
Yeah.
How did they all get on the same page? That was
somewhat
weird.
independently of one another.
Yeah.
Somehow
they're talking. It's getting out.
It speaks to. I think there's a lot of a big underlying tension in our society right now. Is sort of leaning into robotics and artificial intelligence in some ways. I mean, it's. I joke that. Do you have an Alexa in your home or something like that?
Yeah,
Google Home or
but
anything?
my daughters use her for music
Okay.
upstairs, so we don't get to see her very often.
You don't see her much. But the way that I describe Alexa or Google Home or Apple, whatever they call theirs, whatever you're into, is it's one of those things that you don't realize you need until you have it. And need is too strong a word.
Yes,
but
that
it's
is
like,
too strong.
We use ours all the time, right?
Oh, that's funny.
And if you don't have one, you're like, that's stupid. I thought it was stupid when my mom got us the little hockey puck version for Christmas a few years ago, and I'm like, what are we gonna do with this? Now it's like,
yep.
What would we ever do without Alexa? So
but I don't even use Siri.
I think
know.
we lean into this stuff. Siri's another example, but there's a lot of what does this mean for us as a society? What does this mean for the future? And even one of the robotics ads, I think it was for Michelob Ultra, was all about kind of the robot doing all these different things, and then showing us at the end the robot was unable to enjoy the beverage, but I think more poignantly was unable to enjoy the camaraderie.
Yes,
of
people
actual
were in the
humanness.
bar and everyone was connecting and they were on the outside.
Yeah, so it was a totally different sort of vibe there. I think also we saw interesting, this is a broad spectrum here, but you always see interesting advocacy in different ads.
Yes.
I've read a lot of things online that said the ads this year were a lot more mellow in terms of there wasn't a lot that was very provocative, which...
Right. Yeah,
you know me,
fine.
I'm fine with sort of walking through provocative stuff, but I'm good with the ads not being provocative. That's okay.
Totally.
But I thought Budweiser had sort of a clever ad where they played the Answer is Blowing in the Wind song with talking about how their beer is made with wind energy now.
Yes.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to talk in a minute because I know you loved, and so did I, the Bud Light no corn syrup.
Okay, I love that one.
Was funny. Microsoft had that great ad about creating video game controllers to assist kids with special needs. And then we already talked about Washington Post with the news media. So there were some interesting advocacy components.
There was
here.
also the one where it was talking about empowering young ladies. And so that one
with Bumble, which I
didn't really understand the connection to the thing.
I met my wife before dating apps were a thing, so forgive me, I'm a little ignorant in the dating app world, but I didn't quite get how the connection between dating app and empowerment. I missed that.
Well, here's the funny thing. I didn't know it was a dating app. I didn't even know what it was. I literally was, because I was fascinated by the idea that they were talking to, if I would have fallen through with what everybody said, you'll never be anything, and it was very much girl empowerment.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we got to the end and I was like, I assumed that was some type of care product. I had no idea.
As a father of daughters, were you thinking, oh, great, let's empower them. Girls, get the Bumble app. And then you found out what it was. And you're like, girls, delete the Bumble app immediately.
We're not doing that.
That's funny. Okay, so now we're going to talk favorites, least favorites, and a few other things. So here's what we're going to do. We're each going to share, and we'll start with you here. We're each going to share an ad we thought was funny, an ad that made us think, an ad that we just liked, and then an ad that we thought was a big miss. And we'll try to pepper in some sort of what does this tell us culturally, or why do these ads resonate as we do that. So let's start with the fun one, which is just funny. What ad did you find most funny?
Well, I want to say this as well. If you guys are watching live with us and everything, or you're online, please send in yours, because I would love to know what you all think. That makes it even funnier for us, even if it was just the funny ones or what you thought was important to you. And sorry, I just realized I'm kind of turning my back to you. I apologize. That was uncomfortable. All right. So my funny one, I loved now, I've always thought Bud Light has done an amazing job. Well, whoever their ad company is, they're funny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in my family, so here's the funny thing. We don't have beer in our household. And literally my kids, we walk by each other and we go, dilly dilly. And it's just funny because I don't even know what it means. And the guy keeps saying it in the commercials. And my daughters, who don't drink either, will go dilly dilly. And we think it's hilarious. All right. So whatever ad agency they use, they're killer. I mean, it was everything from the Budweiser frog back in the day. Yep. You know what I mean?
What's up?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when they did the corn syrup one, and I love the idea where they look very serious about something and they go, hey, we got a shipment of corn syrup. And it's this enormous, keg thing. And it is 3 times the size of a human being. And they're like, well, that's strange. We don't use corn syrup in our beer. And so they're like, it must be, it must be Miller Lights.
Miller, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, so they go, it must be Miller Lights. And so they do this almost like the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, trek, where they're going over and it's rolling down the hill and they're trying to stop it. And they finally get there and they're like, nope, we got our shipment this morning. That's not ours. But we do use corn syrup, right? So that was the whole point. Right. And they're like, it must be Coors Light. Well, then they have to go up to the snowy mountains, right?
Well, they cross the sea too. They're fighting some sea monster.
Oh, they're fighting the Kraken. But it's so funny because on Coors Light you always have the snowy mountain right on the can.
Yeah.
So they're battling the snow and they get all the way up there and they're like, nope, that's not our. And they're like, don't get me wrong, we do use corn syrup. So to me, the highest form of humor is wit.
Yep.
Where there is something that was either unexpected or they wove a bunch of things in there and they're making fun of themselves. And I think that stuff is absolutely hilarious. Yep. So that was my big win.
Yep, I'm with you. I love that one. I really liked the Hyundai ad with Jason Bateman, where they're advertising their shopper assurance thing, where Jason Bateman is the old elevator guy, and he's taking people up and down to different floors on the elevator,
so
where they have to go to different undesirable things like a root canal or jury duty or the talk and all of that. And here's what I love about I'm just entertained by it. First of all, it's just funny, but on a deeper level, why I like when ads can recognize, okay, we know that people don't like this.
Yes.
We know that people don't like these things. And specifically, for a company to recognize there is part of our kind of deal here that people really hate. And that is going to a lot to buy a car, right? As a consumer, we bought our last car 5 years ago, and I did everything I could to minimize the amount of time
to avoid
I spent at the dealership.
Absolutely.
And they recognize, hey, you hate this, so we're going to make it easier on you. So it was humor in a variety of different ways, mixed with some self-awareness and some self-deprecation. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to buy a car immediately, but I probably will in the next year or two. And I definitely went to Hyundai's website. I'm like, oh, they have a way to buy a car without having to deal with salesperson. I'm interested, right? So I thought it was a great commercial.
Very effective. And just the funny, dry humor of, oh, you're going down, way down. You know what I mean? And then it was all about what's worse.
Right.
Oh, it was fantastic. The last line of the whole thing. You almost like if you moved on, you almost missed it. And he was just like, what
was it?
It was
like
something like
back it up, colon guy.
back it up, colon guy. Yeah, like he was going in for a colonoscopy.
You got it.
He's like, nope, you got to go lower.
You're in. Yeah, that was pretty good. So lots of ads that made us laugh, and some others that have been pointed out here online was the Pepsi ad with Lil Jon. Yeah.
I only knew about him. I only knew about him from the show The Apprentice. That's the only reason why I knew Little John. Little John, he was there.
He has randomly performed at Kings games twice the last 2 years. I don't know why. It's very strange. I don't get it. But anyway, so that one was a good one. People liked the Doritos one with Chance the Rapper and the Backstreet Boys.
That's right.
That was a good one. And anyway, a few others there. So what about an ad that made you think or that you thought was thoughtful or interesting?
Okay, so here's the thing. This is the beauty of being behind everybody else. When you see something and you go, "Ooh, that's amazing," and everyone in the room goes, "Yeah, they've had that for a while." Okay, so when you're ignorant, I still get amazed, right? The Google Translate, when they held up the phone in a foreign country and they were reading all the signs, that was crazy to me.
Yeah.
And my kids were like, "Yeah, they've had that for a while." Okay, but that whole concept that he was trying to encourage the other lady and he would Google Translate, he would talk into his phone, and it would translate for her, and there was connection. It was a whole point of connection all across the world. What made me think was saying that's a game changer.
Yep.
That you are now crossing barriers, and it's because of a technology that will allow the world to interact. Normally, and for millennia, which has blocked people, they're removing. That to me is stunning. That is a earth game-changing technology.
And ads like that don't work if there is not some basic human desire to connect.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is evident.
I still think that's evident about the whole Super Bowl.
Yeah, so which is pretty interesting.
What did you have?
So mine, which kind of similar concept but different idea, was the Microsoft ad for the controller that can be utilized by children who, because of medical conditions or whatever else, can't use traditional controllers. Now,
that was crazy.
I'd heard about this ad beforehand because my wife, who's an occupational therapist, was very excited because some OTs were involved in the making of the product. And it was really beautiful to me because I'm not really a gamer. Like I have a little basketball game I play on my phone from time to time, but I've never really been a big video game guy. And my parents were super strict about it when I was a kid. So it's easy, I think, to hate on gaming as this sort of antisocial thing, as a lazy thing, or whatever else.
Right.
And like a lot of entertainment, it can certainly be that. Or it can be something that brings people together. And the fact is, for those who, because of various, genetic, medical conditions, what have you, who cannot participate in other sorts of activities, it can be a way. Gaming in the 21st century is not a solitary experience.
No, it is not.
Right? It's a lot of...
It is one of the most connective elements of society for young men.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea that a young person who is unable to participate physically in sporting activities, in other sort of more active endeavors, that they've created a product that will bring that person in and they can play on a level playing field with others. And again, just like Google with the language thing, breaking down barriers to bring people together. That's pretty inspiring to me.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that same thing where, you remember on the Recess, there's the kid that was in the wheelchair and couldn't join in. So we've dealt with this with sports, and all of a sudden you started seeing some of the Paralympics, and you started seeing some of those things getting, those barriers broken through. I had seen they had already had an ad with one of those young kids. I've already seen that prior ad done, so I already knew that they were starting to work on that. But when they had them all in there together, going against each other, and everything, it was powerful.
That's pretty cool. All right, now we're gonna move to ad that you liked, and this is the ad that people are talking about the most in the comments here. The ad that you're gonna pick for the one that you liked, and I picked the two. I just want to say that I liked it too. That's the only reason I brought this up. But I like you to be the one to introduce it. So talk to us about your ad that you just thought was great.
Oh, honestly, my favorite one on that was the NFL 100. Yep. I mean, that was the, Roger Goodell's up front, and there's all these stars from every era. And it was, what a beautiful thing of tying in a lot of people already know football because you're watching a football event,
Right.
but now you have the stars from everywhere.
Yep.
You got funny things where Tom Brady's like, hold on, and he's trying to pull off all of his rings and put them all into the hands.
Yep.
He's like, I can't do this yet. They added in little snippets. Now, not everybody knew who Saquon Barkley was. Not everybody knew who some of these people, Emmitt Smith and, and then, so there was a lot of inside jokes.
Totally.
And at the same, not only that, but there's a lot of physical humor. Like they were grabbing people and slamming them into, of course, the body doubles and all that stuff.
Right.
But it was funny. It was captivating. I didn't want to move my eyes off of it because I was afraid I was going to miss a star.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they were coming so fast. And the idea that you would have different eras together in the same room. And then they even dropped in some other ones that made you go, right?
Yeah.
So the young girl, Samantha Gordon.
Who is she? I don't even know who she is.
So she's in Utah, and she was a football player that got really popular even in 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And then she started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So here it was. It says, in 2012, while regularly playing against all-male teams, she compiled 25 touchdowns, 10 extra point conversions on 232 carries for 1,911 rushing yards in a single season.
Dang.
That's this girl.
Wow.
And so at the end, right, it's like, I dare you, try to catch me. And she spins out, and then throws the ball off. And so she kind of got popular on YouTube, and then she said, I want to be in the National Football League.
Got it. Okay.
But the big thing recently was in June 2017, Sam and her father joined together with 5 other Utah Girls Football League players, and they sued 3 school districts to force female American football as a varsity sport.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they actually brought chains that there would be a female football sport, so she's actually opening it up for people behind her.
Okay, interesting.
So she was a game changer. That's why they did all that.
Got it. Okay. I completely agree with you that it was a great ad, and it was like the Super Bowl itself. There was something for everybody in that ad. If you know nothing about football and you just sort of know, okay, this is some sort of gathering of overly testosterone football guys being weird. Like, okay, fine. It's funny. It's physical
it's
humor.
Still funny. Yeah.
But there were, what's that, the term Easter egg, sort of the things that you have to look hard for. I feel like it's one of those ads you could watch 10 times and notice something different. There's stuff in there for football nerds for sure. If you don't know anything about football, you're like, oh, that one guy just caught the ball barely before it hit the ground. But if you know football, you're like, oh, that's Franco Harris, the Immaculate Reception. They're playing on that. It's funny. You got Barry Sanders juking around like he did. It was
you have Terry Bradshaw, who has now become more known as an announcer, right? And he's back there trying to throw, and he looks older, and it's it's all awkward. It was just funny.
Yep. It was a great ad. So my one that I liked was the Amazon Not Everything Works with Alexa ad.
Okay, you got to remind me on that one.
A dog collar, Alexa, for dogs. And as the dog's barking, the Alexa's saying, ordering dog food. And the dog belongs to Harrison Ford. He's getting all irritated. I'm not paying for this. So, and to me, again, it's just funny. But it was sort of a funny play from a company that is automating so much of our lives, by the way, for the company to say there are limits to what all of this automation can do for you.
Right.
And to recognize that in a humorous way, to say, just as we're equipping this device to do lots of things for you, in a humorous way to say it can't do everything. To me, again, as Christ followers, pastors, people who are in the, pardon the term, but business of taking care of people, connecting people, helping people, it was an interesting reminder to me that, hey, there are tons of robotic stuff out there, but it can't do everything.
But how crazy is it that you would dream of a time when a company is large enough that they do a corrective commercial?
Yeah.
Because normally commercials, they're trying to say, we can do everything for you.
Yeah.
And they're like, no.
We can do a lot.
We can do a lot for you, but we can't do it. Why would they even want to highlight that?
Yeah.
What do you think was their point in talking about their limitations?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think it's similar to what we saw. I mean, you mentioned a lot of these robotic ads that a variety of them didn't really work or were sort of uneasy for people. I think that for a big corporation, and maybe if I thought more about this, I'd think differently, but I think for a big corporation to show a little bit of heart, to show we recognize our limits in what we can provide, and we're not interested in creating a sort of dystopian Amazon universe, which sometimes it feels like that's what's going on. There's something in that makes us say, oh, okay, like it almost makes us a little less suspicious maybe of the technology to say, all right, I want to utilize this for what
brand trust.
Yeah, for what it's used for, but to recognize it can't do it all. Now, Amazon, of course, pointed that out in a pretty funny way. You can do that in a lot of different... I mean, I think that, again, that Michelob ad pointed it out in sort of an odd way. But anyway, it's just... I think that's why... What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I'd already shared all my thoughts.
Well, there you go. Okay. Now, the ad that was a big swing and a miss for you, someone in the comments has already mentioned yours. I've not had anybody mention the one that I didn't like. So if you're watching live and you have one you really hated, put it in the comments. We'll see if we get to it while Lance is sharing his. But Lance, say yours that was a big miss for you.
Okay, TurboTax Live had the creepy kid face on the robot.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a whole... Now, this just pinged on a couple things that are really unsettling for me. Anything that has to do with weird, creepy kids just throws me off.
Yeah.
And so here, if you didn't see it, here's what it was. This android, it's just a robot body with a face, a child's face plastered over the front. Not even a full head, just the face. And they're all in what looks like the garage. I don't know why we're all in the garage, but there's 3 people talking to him. And it says, when I grow up, it's almost like this Pinocchio, I want to be a real boy. When I grow up, I want to be a TurboTax representative. Well, then the dad, he keeps calling him father, the dad's like, yeah, well, that you can't really do that. And then they just start humiliating, going, you're never going to be truly alive. And then this thing, it just gets sadder and sadder. And the thing goes, that makes me very sad. And is that true, Dad? I'm never going to be anything. And then at the end, it starts to cry. But instead of crying, it starts hilariously laughing because it's not attuned to emotion, right? And so now you have a laughing, sad child, and then the commercial ends. What the heck? Oh my gosh. So it was creepy to look at, which I never liked the puppy monkey baby thing. That kind of stuff freaks me out too, because once again,
it's just weird.
It's weird baby stuff. But everything on this was wrong. I literally was like, if I had TurboTax, I would have to go throw it away now because that was horrid.
Like, you're okay. I get it. Your CPAs are real people, but
and that was their whole point. Yeah, that we have live people that care for you, and we know how to minister to you where you're at.
Minister?
I'm sorry. That was such a Christian pastor thing to say. Wow, that was embarrassing.
But I mean, the idea, minister in the sense of administer what you're trying to do. But yes, sorry, I just had to give you a hard time.
No, that's good.
So totally with you. That one was creepy as heck. Okay, mine was the Mint Mobile ad, which, credit to them. I had never heard of them until I saw their ad. And now I've heard of them, and now I'm talking about them. But their ad was a poor execution of what could have been a funny concept.
Okay, well, you got to tell us the commercial.
So what happened was, and I'm going to get the details a little bit fuzzy here, but it's a guy who hears that like Mint Mobile, he's sitting on his couch and he hears that Mint Mobile is available for $20 a month or whatever it is. And he says something like $20 a month, like that's not right. And then some like weird character mascot guy says like, no, you know what's not right? Chunky Milk's not right. And it flashes into the TV to a family in their kitchen.
Yes.
Passing around Chunky Milk and saying how much they like Chunky Milk and drinking it. And then it goes back to the guy on the couch saying, that's not right. And then the mascot guy says, kind of like your wireless bill. Okay. Chunky Milk is just disgusting.
It looks like curdled milk.
Right.
And they have to chew it while they're drinking it. Right. And it's really unsettling.
Right. And there's just nothing to me, people drinking Chunky Milk is not funny. There is lots of things people can do. Like, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes, like, those videos of people doing ridiculous things and hurting themselves, like, even I find that kind of funny, right?
I find it very funny.
There's some humor to that. But to me, there's just nothing funny about people drinking Chunky Milk. Now, I get what they were trying to do. Again, it's trying to sort of demonstrate that something is good by talking about something that's really bad. But I felt like it was a concept that just... In this case, it really didn't work. And I feel like actually in a lot of advertising, I see concepts that I think could be really, really funny they're just not executed. Like,
Right.
have you seen the ads, the Hotels.com ads with Captain Obvious?
Oh, yeah.
I feel
For
like that
sure.
is a really clever premise,
Yes.
but the ads are almost never funny.
Right.
I feel like in this case, it could have been a clever premise. In fact, I use this sort of idea, I use it as an illustrative thing in my preaching sometimes, where let's say I'm talking about envy and trying to illustrate that envy is a bad idea. I'll say, I've never had someone come up to me and say, Brian, when things really started to turn around for the positive in my life was when I started just being really envious and jealous of other people. And people laugh and,
Right.
and I say that because it's funny, but I also say because it's really helpful to illustrate like, oh yeah, that's right. That doesn't make any sense. Like maybe I should look in my own heart and see where there's envy. So the idea of like the contrast between good and bad, like that works. So I'm not
Yes.
hating on the idea,
Nope.
but if you gross people out, it's just not funny.
Okay, so here's my thing. I think that any commercial that leaves you with a sick feeling in your stomach and then they put up their name, I feel like isn't that kind of a psychological thing that you instantly associate with nausea? Like, I don't want my name associated with nausea. It's almost like, how back in the day they would give electric shock whenever they would see certain things to try to stop them. The whole rubber band on your wrist, you would hurt yourself, so you wouldn't want a cigarette. Every time you reach for a cigarette, you'd snap yourself.
Yeah.
Okay,
negative
I think that negative association has been pretty well driven in, and I feel like they're doing that with their commercials. Hey, I feel sick to my stomach, like I'm going to go throw up. Oh, Mint Mobile. Like what?
Yay!
Like I unless I'm utilizing it in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just don't see the reason for it.
So, okay, last thing, and this wasn't in any of our show prep or any of our show notes, so I'm just springing a deep question on you last second here. But I spoke a moment ago about how, as Christ followers and certainly as pastors, we're called to be people who are paying attention to, analyzing, exegeting culture.
Yeah.
As you're watching this game, and I know you, as do I mean, you really view everything in your life through this lens of as a pastor, what does this say about our society? What does it say about how we communicate the gospel? What does this say about the way we do ministry? So many things. So it's not just passive consumption, that it always is, all of these different things we see, whether it's movies or sports or whatever, raise questions for us to consider as we're seeking to do ministry. That being said, as you watch the Super Bowl, you watch the ads, what did you learn, or what was maybe a reminder to you about our culture that came through some of what you saw, whether it's in the ads or the presentation of the game or the halftime show or anything else?
Well, I think unfortunately we've already covered it. The biggest thing for me, whenever I watch any type of advertisement of any sort, it's always what is the longing they're trying to touch, right? And of course, from my vantage point, my bias, that it's always going to go back to Jesus has created us in such a way that we're only filled up by him. And so all advertisement seems to say, how can you sell the idea that something other than God will help you be a better person?
Mm-hmm.
And so I always look through that lens. And what I found was there was an awful lot of honesty of saying we really have a lot of voids that we can't seem to fill. That seemed like a big. We've already talked about that, though.
Yeah.
That this longing for connection, this longing for community, that AI can only go so far. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That was really kind of the big aha moment from this particular thing. Just kind of the longing of humanity, what they really need. What about you?
Well, I mean, it's the same. I mean, I think it's so interesting that historically, right, ads always overpromise. Get this new
Absolutely.
toothpaste and your life will be perfect
Yes.
and amazing, and your kids will behave, and all this kind of nonsense. And the reason why ads exist like that is because they work, right? They
For
wouldn't
sure.
exist if they didn't work. And certainly we saw some that were like that. Some ads that were sort of your standard, hey, look how awesome our
Right.
stuff is. Chance
Yes.
the Rapper will start dancing if you eat Doritos, whatever.
Yes.
But I do think there was more recognition of the limitation of some products than maybe we'd seen before, which, to your point,
Yep.
speaks to our longing to connect, speaks to ultimately our longing to connect with something beyond ourselves, to connect with God, to see some greater purpose beyond our new phone service, our new car, our new beer we drink, wine we drink, food we eat, whatever. And I think it's an old message. It's something that we as Christ followers have known for a long time, that we need something beyond ourselves. We need something beyond the physical and the material. But it's interesting to see in a secular setting, particularly one as culturally relevant as the Super Bowl, to see that evident in so many ads was interesting to me, and almost in a weird way, sort of encouraging. To be like,
for sure.
oh, okay. So the limitation that everyone's talking about here, we know where that comes from, and we know what to do about it.
Yeah.
As Christ followers, I thought was pretty interesting.
Well, I found that it all seemed very millennial to me because the whole apologizing and correcting your image and everything is really a millennial thing, because the millennials had been burned by overpromising for so long that now they've said, we've shut you all out. We now will go through and filter you. You can't even reach us by commercials anymore.
Yep.
We will DVR you and we'll skip over you and we'll bleep you and you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so they were trying to reach the millennial and saying, hey, sorry about that. We'll try to be a little bit more honest with you if you'll continue to watch us. Yeah. So I thought that was fascinating.
That is, you're absolutely right. That's an interesting point. All right, well, an hour about the Super Bowl, commercials and everything else. And I hope that as you were able to listen to this, a little bit of an offbeat episode for us, hopefully you just recognize that there is stuff to pay attention to all around us. It's helping us understand our culture, helping us understand how do we communicate the gospel, how do we talk about Jesus in the midst of a culture that values a lot of different things. And it's often these big events that can help us understand those values so that we can speak Christ into a world that we're understanding a little bit better. So, hopefully, in the midst of all of our silliness, that's something you were able to get. Hopefully that was helpful for you. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of Engaging Culture.
Thank you for listening to Engaging Culture, a podcast by Bridgeway Christian Church. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Thank you so much for listening. Music is used under the Creative Commons license and is provided by Dexter Britton.